Today we're taking a look at 5 different Taishokotos for a couple different reasons. One is documentation. If you look up any model of Taishokoto, you're not likely to get a bunch of results on that specific type and how it differs from other ones, how it sounds, etc. 2, in that same vein, maybe it can help some people out who are looking to get their first Taishokoto or get another one to see how it sounds beforehand. 3, I want to pick apart the differences between the different models, how they sound based on those differences and what you should look for. And 4, a general review. So going through the models we're looking at today, we've got 2 Kikuyae F28RP and F28JS, the Suzuki Tenga, Suzuki Benkei, and the Kimura Mine, which means peak. Now it is worth a pause here on the name. I mention Mine meaning peak because it's a peak, sure. Some of them are a little more descript and it's a little confusing. The Suzuki Benkei. Now, Benkei can mean either strong person or a bamboo tube. One would have you believe that it's a bamboo tube because on the box that it comes in, there's bamboo on it. But I do want to clarify, this is not made of bamboo. Bamboo has nothing to do with it. It's just a name. This is actually a semi-common practice and a bit misleading, so if you see something with a name that implies a material, don't trust it. So coming into what to look for in a Taishokoto, there's 4 points I think are worth mentioning. 1 is the manufacturer. This encompasses some of the later parts, but it means that they have access to certain build techniques, build quality, different woods, etc. The next is the build structure. This is generally per model, but let's take a look at the Kikuyae versus the Kimura versus the Benkei. All very different build styles and all lead to very different types of sound. This is not to say that it's locked per company. If you look at Kimura, they have a ton of different models with different styles. It's just some companies actually prefer certain styles or are better at certain styles. Then if we look at the description for the Benkei, you'll see they tout a special structure inside, and luthiers can get a little carried away here, but this tends to go back to Suzuki's origins in making violins, so they tout that it's using the same structure as the internals of a violin. Next we have the wood type, and this goes for type of wood, technique of wood, and quality of wood. As I mentioned before, the quality of the wood is sometimes dependent on the company here. Big company might have access to higher quality wood at cheaper prices, but since they're making a lot, they may actually have to standardize on lower quality wood for certain models. The type of wood will obviously affect the sound, we know this. And the third point here is the technique of wood, as I'll call it, but what I really mean here is solid wood versus veneer. A lot of companies aren't too forthcoming with it, so you have to look at the wood grain. That's a whole separate topic, but if it's solid wood versus a veneer is wood coating on top of a core. That core can of course be higher or lower quality. It can be a plywood or it can be a composite of very nice wood, and it can be different based on the model, nicer core, lower quality in the same company. This is also a point of contention that I won't necessarily tackle. I say use your ears, but some people prefer solid wood versus veneer and vice versa. On the one hand, veneers are known to age a little better than a solid wood in terms of retaining the sound that they were made with. That said, solid woods are known to age nicely for certain ones, so certain types of wood may age with a more refined, deeper sound, full. Some may age poorly, warp out of shape, and sound terrible. And that constitutes the fourth point, which is age. You have to look at the condition of the instrument, obviously, but what that does to the wood, what type of wood it is, all comes back into play. So let's do some comparisons. The RP is a high-quality spruce from a high-end company. The JS, which is around the same age, therefore has the same structure, same company, same age, the only difference being the wood. I think the JS, which has a Dutch pine, sounds a little richer and fuller. The RP sounds great, but it has more twang in the high end, which sounds like Scottish bagpipes to me. Now let's look at 2 spruce instruments. We have the Tenga versus the RP. They sound super different. The Tenga sounds a bit deeper, gets a little louder, and it sounds a little saturated almost, with a bit of flatness to the sound. Now let's pull up the Tenga, Benkei, and Kimura. The Tenga and Benkei are from the same company, but sound completely different. The Benkei sounds very full. It's a mix of spruce and maple, but we saw it has a special structure on the inside as well. So there's different shaping, and the company's not the only important thing, obviously. Then we bring in the Kimura, which has a cedar top. It's interesting because it manages to both sound a little more full and a little more dull. This is likely due to that solid wood cedar top. I believe that with age it kind of dulled the high end but gave it a nice mature sound, if you will. This one really does come back to personal preference. It does add a nice aspect of dynamics when you're playing. Compare this to the Kikuyae, which is still high quality but has a veneer top, so it kept more of its high end with age. So let's go through some demos of strumming and playing a song, and then there's a couple more things to note after that. So after that, we have playability. The big wooden keys of the Kimura are simpler to hit and more forgiving. Compare that to the tiny oval keys on the RP, which are a bit annoying, as you might have been able to tell in my playing. But don't let this detract you. As you saw in the JS, I put little caps on, which makes it much more enjoyable and super forgiving. Then we have the Tenga, which has a really long travel for hitting the button to fully depress it onto the fretboard. It adds a little noise, but it does give it more side travel for expression when playing. And then last but not least, we have looks. Honestly, they all look good. The pegs on the Kimura are really cool because they're more standard pegs rather than going all the way through the headstock. This makes them a lot easier if you need to replace them. It's not some custom long piece as you might be accustomed to on a classical guitar. The headstock on the Tenga looks really cool. The JS detailing is fantastic. The rosewood on the RP looks divine. The Benkei fascinates me. It's simultaneously the least interesting looking one, but also one of my favorites as far as sound goes. I'm sure I'll be doing more comparisons, but this video should serve as basics for what to look for, and we'll expand on that down the road. If you enjoyed, then like and subscribe. For support or samples, Patreon site. If you hate my content, I will not lie. To the corner I go, where I will cry.